Good evening and welcome to this first edition of the Embers into Sparks talks, a special series of 6 online discussions about emerging knowledge, ideas, and challenges. These unique weekly gatherings have been developed in partnership between the Orkney International Science Festival and the Scottish Government Ecosystem Fund, in connection with the Scottish Technology Ecosystem Review. My name is Matt Vidmar. I'm a lecturer in engineering management at the University of Edinburgh, and it is my pleasure to host this session tonight and to introduce our speakers, Dr. Howie Firth and fellow Slovenian, Dr. Stanko Blatnik. The talk tonight will center on a radical approach to the growing problem of economic centralization in only 40 mega regions. The answer is to link up islands and rural areas through digital technology, but more about that just in a second. First, we introduce the speakers. Dr. Howie Firth is the founder and director of Orkney International Science Festival. After graduating in mathematical physics from Edinburgh and Durham universities, he became a traveling teacher in the smaller island schools in his native Orkney. Interest in community development took him into broadcasting, and he pioneered a new type of community radio station at the BBC Radio Orkney. He also later created the template for the Edinburgh Science Festival, a format which is now followed worldwide. His interests span physics, history, philosophy, music, folklore, and any kind of technology and innovation. And he leads several national and international organizations for promotion of science, development, and cooperation. Dr. Stanko Blatnik is director of EPAC Institute for Symbolic Analysis and Development of Information Technologies. He is also a theoretical physicist by training, with degrees from the universities of Sarajevo, Belgrade, and Zagreb. He was a professor of physics at the University of Tuzla and a member of board of the Slovenian high-tech manufacturers Gorenje Process Equipment. As an innovator and developer, he founded and led a series of projects and initiatives in the wider information technology sector, focusing especially on interdisciplinary perspectives and creativity. His work spans economic development, emerging technology, and social innovation, especially focusing on electronic learning and digital communications. As they develop their thoughts tonight, if you have any questions for our speakers, please do enter them in the YouTube's live chat. We'll try to come back to this at the end of the talk. But for now, Howie and Stanko, it's over to you.
Oh, thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction, Matjaž. And the starting point is economic development, which in the past was linked to natural resources. Population maps of countries like Scotland today show a concentration of people in areas where there is geologically a concentration of oil or iron, or certainly was in the past, or it might be ports for shipping products. But today those coal mines have closed, and the economic opportunities for the communities around are much less. In fact, economic opportunities quite patchy across any country. There are areas of industrial decline, and in contrast, there are other areas with more industries and jobs and prosperity. This seems to be a pattern around the world. And the areas of prosperity are much bigger than single cities on their own. Within individual countries, there are various big regions, each containing a number of cities and their hinterlands, and each one of these big regions is characterized by a concentration of economic activity. This picture has been gradually built up by researchers, in particular Professor Richard Florida of the University of Toronto. For each country across the world, Richard Florida and his team studied nighttime photographs. They measured light concentrations, and then they compared these to populations and the level of economic activity. The result of their work was to show that around the world, there are 40 large areas with much more economic activity than you would expect. And they call these 40 large areas mega regions. There are some in the UK. The largest mega region in the UK is the area stretching from London through Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, and into Birmingham. Even bigger than this is Europe's largest megaregion, which spans national boundaries. It's the area from Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and the Ruhr, Cologne, Brussels, Antwerp, and Lille. The largest megaregion in the whole world is Greater Tokyo. In the US, the level of output in these megaregions, and you can see them scattered across the country there, and a really huge one on the right, the Boston, Washington one. The output in the megaregions is nearly 30% higher than in the rest of the country. And in the EU, the differential is over 40%. So it really matters to live and work in a megaregion. Overall, the top 40 megaregions in the world contain 18% of the world's population, but they produce 66% of the economic activity. They produce 2/3 of the world's wealth, and almost 9 out of 10, 86% of the world's patented inventions. They also have 84% of the most cited scientists in the world. And each of these 40 megaregions has an annual economic output of over $100 billion. And that is comparable with the whole economic output, the whole GDP of the 40th largest nation in the world. So that's the scale of these megaregions. And indeed, the economic output of the one I pointed to just a moment ago, the Boston, New York, Washington corridor in the US, that's the second largest megaregion in the world. Its economic output is greater than that of the whole of France or the UK. So these megaregions are where economic growth is concentrated. And as the ideas of Richard Florida became known, people investigated, and I think Stanko must have been one of the very earliest in the field. And indeed, we could see Stanko's town of Volhynia here, which is beautifully set with the hills behind. And I think we've a second slide of Volhynia as well. And that shows how it was built up. In fact, Stanko, I guess, Volhynia had been extremely damaged in the war, was it? And then was there a big rebuilding after the war?
No, Volhynia was very small village after the Second World War. You know, there was coal mine which was exploited with the German, and that picture is Volhynia in 1960, and first one was 10-15 years later. So it developed very fast. It has 2,000 inhabitants in 1945, and now it's about 30,000. You know, I was a small child, and for us it was big event when we see a big truck coming, one per day. And if you look now at the, you see every minute one airplane. And in that time, I never thought that we will produce some kind called TV or computer in that small city. You know, it was developed very fast. Now it has its own problem because it's all industry, coal-based, thermal power point. We had to find solutions.
And you, in fact, have been looking widely. In fact, you were in the US when you first came across Richard Florida's ideas.
Yes, in the 2003, I think the first book, Rise of Creative Class, was published. And at that time, I was teaching in Silicon Valley on the West Valley College, some kind of web design and such stuff. And earlier, I was working at University Tuzla, and I had quite high position. But in 1985, I decided to go to Volhynia, back where my father was living. And my student asked me, why you are going, you know? And I said, I want to make Silicon Valley from that Shaleshka Valley. What's a really possible job, you know? I didn't know, but when I was reading Florida book and I was in that environment, and I saw that there is unique environment you cannot find in any place in the world. I remember that somewhere, I think that in one of his book, Florida, said there were many projects, Silicon Valley there, but no project succeed. I will say that what are people doing? Usually some kind of, Feynman called it cargo cult in science. During the Second World War, when Americans were liberating Ireland, they made airport there, and native people from Ireland saw that the big bird is coming, bringing food and all. But then, from strategic reason, American army left the island, and so they made the same kind of copy of signalization, hoping that the bird will come. And that is happening. People say, oh, we will have a Silicon Valley, so it means we will have incubator, we will have research center, we'll have, venture capital, but it does not work. Usually that venture capital is going to Silicon Valley. And I remember Celia, which is close to Slovenia, they made in 2005 or something like that, they called Technopolis. Somebody was in Finland, in Oulu, and he saw that there is Technopolis, and they said, we will make, I said to that people, I said, Boris, it's impossible, you need human resources and no other to do, but they made building which is copy of building in the Oulu, but it does not work, so that's the main problem which I found out, because I really thought, oh, it's possible to build Silicon Valley somewhere, but it's not, and that rise of creative class and gave me that. I found the truth, so that you have to find some other way in part of world which is out of 40 largest mega region. Yeah.
You have to find a distinctive way. We'll be able to come back to that in a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, there's the question that you were leading into. How is it that so much of the world's activity is concentrated in these places, which then leads to the question of how we can copy or find a way to do it our own way? Well, Richard Florida says it's about people and money. He says mega regions are simply areas where people and money move around readily. He says the key today to regional prosperity is no longer resources, but, as you were saying, Stanko, people. He says the new industries of today are built around people and skills, and that the mega regions are the places which, for one reason or another in the past, have the people. And he says once you have the people and the prosperity, more people then will want to move in. And once you start that process of growth towards being a mega region, you'll find success breeds success. In his words, the mega regions of today perform functions that are somewhat similar to those of the great cities of the past, massing together talent, productive capability, innovation, and markets. But they do this on a far larger scale. And he probes into the detail. What are the specific factors that draw people into a mega region? He says the kind of people who set up new businesses today, and particularly innovative businesses, are looking for the best local situation for a business. And there are three factors that really matter. Now, the first factor is talent. They need people with ideas and skills. And this is one of the workshops that Stanko is going to be telling us about later. And there's a list of 3 T's. And these, says Richard Florida, are the secret. Now, the first one then, T for talent. That's why some industries will locate in a business park near a university, but this applies to all types of skills and talents. The second T that makes people locate in a specific area is technology, the physical resources to put ideas into effect. They might want a unit of manufacturing equipment to produce a prototype. They might want some electronic or digital resource. They're looking for an area with a range of research institutions and companies that have the best and most available technology in their field of interest. Now, these first 2 might be expected with a little thought. People setting up new companies clearly need that first T for talent. They clearly need the second T, suitable technology. The third T is a surprise. What really matters in a location, says Professor Florida, is tolerance. By this, he means a relaxed and pleasant society. Tolerance involves the overall relaxed values of the whole community outside the workplace, the availability of really good coffee houses and theatres and parks, and the surrounding natural environment. Innovative people will appreciate such a place for themselves and also for the added attraction for able people to come and live. And the coffee houses are a space where people can meet and explore ideas. This third factor of tolerance is really totally revolutionary because it goes against the established principles of economic development. In so many areas of development, we're told the priority is to spend money first on factories. And then when the jobs come and money increases, then parks and art galleries may be considered. Richard Florida turns it the other way around. Get the environment right, he said, and the activity will follow. Some business parks have been putting an effort to the environment. Here's a couple of images from Horizon Scotland near Forres in Murray. And you can see the grass on the roof as well. And then in this next one, you can see the waterside. So T for tolerance means a pleasant environment. So to summarize so far, the world's economic activities concentrated in 40 mega regions. They've got the industries of today. Because they've much of the innovation, they'll have the industries of tomorrow as well. They're increasingly where you find the ideas and the money that make those ideas happen. And they're drawing in people and resources from the rest of us. Richard Florida says firms locate where skill, capabilities and markets clusters, capital flows to where the returns are greatest, highly skilled people move where opportunity lies. So the big question is, can anything be done about it? Is there anything which remoter and more rural communities and islands can do? And Stanko, this is very much again where you yourself and your ideas come in.
Yeah, so after I read the first Florida bestseller, The Rise of Creative Class, in which their 3T are described, so we wanted to see where is Slovenia. So we made some kind of research in different cities in Slovenia, Ljubljana, Maribor, Murska Sobota, Koper, Velenje, Celje. And what we found out, that we do not have 3Ts in one place, For example, Velenje is interesting. It's a relatively young city with people coming from different parts of former Yugoslavia, So it has some different culture. Culture diversity, what is good, because Silicon Valley, I think about 40% of people are not born in the United States, and if you look, so many is from Asia, so many is from Latin, and so on, you have really, and Silicon Valley is incredibly tolerant, and Velenje is tolerant, but we do not have university. That's one big problem, because for Silicon Valley it was important, very important, that they have Stanford University and that they have Professor Frederick Terman, who called Hewlett and Packard and said to them, we have to develop electronics here, not only on the East, go East, do Master of Science degree, come back. And then he gave them $500 to start in garage Hewlett Packard, and then later they made it Stanford Research Center on the land of the Stanford University. Then Xerox made the park, that Palo Alto Research Center, where almost all was done, So we have tolerant, but we have even maybe talented people, but we do not have technology, we do not have challenging opportunities, because if you have high technology, then you are more motivated. So, and the result for Slovenia was really not the best. We are out of that 40 mega region. So I started to think how we can do it. You cannot copy. You cannot copy that region because you do not have that university, you do not have the technology. you have not maybe the tolerance or so on what is needed. So, and we were looking for, and then maybe I will talk a little bit later about what we have done. And for me, what looks as a good orientation, I think that it could be done, although you have now all that, how to say, conditions which you need to become mega region.
Really interesting about and just to say, Stanko, it really needs all three T's in place.
I think that if you really want to make something like Silicon Valley, which in principle is impossible, no other region is, but all the regions have that. And for us, it's not so easy to do it, especially, as I said, you have talented people, but you don't have university. You have to find some kind of other way to do that. Tolerance I think the Slovenia is pretty much tolerant, Unfortunately, some other part of former Yugoslavia, which had a nice mix, for example, Sarajevo, was a city in which you have four largest religions. You have Catholic, you have Orthodox, you have Islam, and you had quite a lot of Jewish before the Second World War, So they had that culture, but with that, how to say, unfortunately, with the war in Bosnia and Balkan War, all is lost, and it's very difficult to build that again. But I strongly believe if you want to make a really strong economy and so on, you need that. But how much, that's another stuff. And is there another way? For example, you cannot have Stanford University, you cannot have Berkeley, as Silicon Valley has close to Berkeley. And then you have a lot of colleges. Then you have San Jose University, Santa Cruz close. Somehow it's possible, but you have to be focused to see what is your strength, what you have to do, and maybe we can discuss it a little bit more later.
Well, that leads neatly into the next piece of the story, because there's some interesting examples over the years of the three T's in action in Orkney, and particularly in the town of Stromness, and that leads to a university connection. The town's had the problem of a grand dual rundown as jobs and people moved to the main town of Kirkwall. But the first T for talent was helped by the arrival of the oil industry and also by the development of subaqua diving in Scapa Flow, and then by the university connection, the establishment of Heriot-Watt University's International Centre for Island Technology, which has had a huge impact over more than 30 years now, huge impact through its staff and its students. And it's moved now into its present accommodation with the rectangular building, which actually fits well into the landscape. It was at the old academy, which is just up and slightly to the left there. And the result of ICIT establishing in Stromness, it's been a tremendous stimulus for development and for the formation of companies with specialist energy and environmental skills, which are providing services across the world. And then Stromness also has now EMEC, the European Marine Energy Centre, and that's in those buildings, the old academy buildings, slightly up and to the left. And EMEC enables the developers of new types of wave and tidal power devices to have them tested in some of the most extreme sea conditions in the world. And there you can see a crane there in action and one of EMEC's devices. EMEC is a fine example of the T for technology with the testing facilities it has in place. Also a fine example of T for talent with the skilled people it employs, some local and some coming from elsewhere. And a further T for talent has come from several Orkney companies formed by people with a strong maritime background, and their specialist vessels are an example of T for technology. So this combination of ICIT and EMEC and many other groups and companies and people has meant a really dynamic climate in Stromness around energy and renewables with the town as a focus. And The town also excels in the third T for tolerance, both in terms of the community generally and also in terms of its setting with its old buildings, piers, closes and wonderful walks and views round about over the sea. And there on the harbour front, it has the Pier Arts Centre, the result of a wonderfully generous donation of works of art by a remarkable woman, the late Margaret Gardner, who wanted to find the right home for them. The Pier Arts Centre has encouraged young Orcadians into an art career, and it's brought many artists to live and work in Orkney, and that stimulated the opening of further galleries. Its presence has added to the attraction of the town for visitors and also to helping to generate a feeling of vibrancy to counter the rundown from the closure over the years of shops along the street. And here's another fine example of the third T. It's the tremendous development of Stromness Museum, which has steadily expanded in its space and range of activities. And another example of the third T in Orkney as a whole is the great development of archaeology. It started in the mid-90s, this big development, started by a lady of immense energy and vitality, Daphne Lorimer, who came out with a vision for the future. She said that Orkney had the potential to be awarded World Heritage status, to be a key part of the proposed new University of the Highlands and Islands, and to feature on TV in the Time Team. She went out and achieved all three targets and much more. And that area today is it must be one of the most renowned archaeological excavations in the world, with tremendous coverage in National Geographic and elsewhere. And indeed, Orkney today has many archaeologists and a rich range of skills and equipment, and an image that's bringing people from around the world to visit. So Orkney archaeology would be a good example of all three T's coming together. And just before going back to Stanko, I should mention that in Slovenia, there are places that look at both past and future. There's the center in the village of Vitinje, telling about the history of spaceflight. And here's an image there of the design of the building. And the second slide shows an image of the inside. And then, as we'll hear now, Stanko's been developing projects in Vilenia. And first, here are two more really atmospheric images of the town. And you can see what a beautiful place, Stanko, you live in.
Yeah, Vilenia was developing very fast, after the Second World War, because Yugoslavia needs coal, and they have a very successful director who wanted to make good condition for miners, because a lot of miners came from Belgium and France, and they back after the Second World War, and they said, "Oh, conditions are bad." And somehow he got money from federal government, and Vilenia started to develop fast. And as you see, the valley there are a lot of houses, and you see the largest power plant, coal-based power plant in Slovenia. It's about 600 megawatts, and there are a lot of damages of land because of coal mine, which is there are lakes which are artificial one, but Vilenia has a really very good, how to say, standard of living. We have distance heating and all that stuff. Unfortunately, we did not make university on time. We had some institutes. We have strong ecological institute. So we are good in that, but that's not enough. But I want to say something about one project we made. We called it Out of 40, because I was working with the University of Tuzla, and Tuzla is very similar somehow to Vilenia. It has coal, it has power plant, but it had a strong chemical industry. The first soda ash production, or second soda ash production, was the Solvay owned factory. It was second in Europe, so it was pretty strong. And then we have the Tuzla has university with about, in that time when we were doing that, about 20,000 students and covering all stuff. So my idea was let's connect Slovenia and Tuzla. So we invited a group of students from Tuzla. 3 of them were computer scientists. They were studying computer science or technical information, and then 4 were from department for rehabilitation. And the students were, that 2 groups were working together at Velenia for a week. And the idea was to develop some kind of software which will support children with problem with speech, logoped or something like that. And how we have done? In the morning, students which were working in software were visiting software companies at Velenia. Students who were supporting people with disabilities were visiting institutions which are supporting people with disability. There are a few of them here, and they are really nice. Slovenia is really supporting people with disabilities strong. And then afternoon, they started to work on software. There were a lot of discussion, people from students from rehabilitation department say we wanted that, and in 1 week, they got prototype. The problem was that I said, idea is good. So you have to find the young people and some elder people like me, who will help them to work together, find the problem which is interesting and do it. And it's really possible to do on that, I will say, intensive work quite a lot. But after 6-7 days, they went back to Bosnia, to Tuzla, and they were not collaborating more, And we did not make any effort to do some kind of commercialization of product, to put product on market. So that was the problem. And another problem is this, Bosnia is really not very well situation. What happened? My idea was we will help Bosnia to make some company which will start to work internationally. All 3 software engineers, they are not more in Bosnia. One is working for Renault, French Renault, I don't know where. 2 are in Austria, one is working for Bosch. Some people who were from working in field of rehabilitation are now in Sweden, some in United States. So we were supporting, how to say, developed countries in that way, But I learned a lot. You have to do a little bit different, You have to make more connections. You have to try to find way to market, because then they will be more interested. And it's possible. It does not need a lot of money, because our institute had some places where they can live, so it was done really very easy. But I did not how to continue to do in that field. Maybe it's bad. I had to try to do more, But that idea is really good, and we made some kind of networking between Slovenia, Velenia, and Tuzla, and I think that's model which can be used. So I hope that maybe we will do something now,
It's a very interesting model, Stanko. Some very key points there. The fact that it was done without spending a lot of money, also that you were bringing people together across all kinds of national borders, and you were bringing young people with older people. So indeed, there's some very interesting things there. And that leads on to this question then of, could something be done on a bigger scale? Well, these examples show what can be done in a small community far from the mega regions. It can take time, it can require inspirational people with immense energy and vision, but it can be done. We should now note that a mega region is so big, it takes time to travel within it. For instance, in the biggest UK mega region that we saw earlier, the one from London to, including London and Birmingham, well, the distance between those 2 cities is an hour and a half by train, and London-Manchester is 2 hours. And with a car or a bus or an underground journey to the station, the total time will be even more. Furthermore, the last 2 years of the COVID pandemic have seen a big change in meetings, with Zoom now a household word, and many organizations noticing how much travel time has been saved. So if we move online, then there's not such an advantage in living in a mega region. Indeed, if people in a mega region are freed up and able to choose where to base themselves, well, some of them are likely to want to move to a more rural area. So people and organizations now maybe have more potential to form new working networks online. Could we form these bigger networks? And Stanko, to come back to you, that was the question you were asking in Slovenia, and in particular, that key one you focused on. Could the internet, could digital communication links be used to bring together communities across borders, maybe even across Europe and beyond, to form the nucleus of what one day could even be a virtual mega region?
When we started our institute in 2000, we got one quite big project supported by the Slovenian government, in which we were working on teleworking, home-based business, and online learning. We call that dynamic learning and something like that. And we were doing that. The project was, we were collaborating with Danish Institute for Technology. There was Millard, he's UK citizen working in Denmark. Then in teleworking, I think that there is Mr. Mitchell from Teleworking Association from UK. Then we had in Austria a partner, and we have done a lot, But what happened at that time in 2000, somehow it does not work as we expected. In principle, it looks like it has to be, for example, very famous American futurist, I think, Toffler, who wrote Future Shock and the Third Way. In Third Way said people will go to live in an electronic cottage. So they will be not so much in big cities. They will go to the country. They will have better quality of life. If they will change the employee, they will change the computer connection, But it didn't work. And now, although the COVID is pretty bad, somehow it changed a lot because of all that stuff we have done. We got, quarantine and something. So people start to work at home. It's interesting that now Apple has problem because people wanted to stay at home because Silicon Valley is expensive. It's much easier to live somewhere out, and then they have to travel 2 hours or something like that to work and back. And they said we do not need so many physical connection, face-to-face work, And on the other hand, we started in all schools to use online learning. There was a lot of problem, I have to say, because teachers were not prepared. Although technology was here, and technology is good enough, There were several projects, especially EU-funded projects in the field of online learning or e-learning, somehow you can call it. But teacher did not use it, that results. But now, when people had to do that, it changed, and then people are using Zoom much more. There are much more meetings. You have not to go to Ljubljana and back to Velenje into loss, 3 hours. So I think that's really big opportunity, and we have to use it. So to make a network, to use ICT technology, to connect different regions, to work together on projects, and it's really much cheaper and easier, and you have much more time. In principle, there is need for face-to-face, but you don't need to have it all time. You need some kind in the learning. You need some kind of blended learning. We found that because we organized several courses, and we found that only online is not the best one. You have to have some combination. Maybe once a month you have to meet together, discuss a little bit, and then next month you are working online. So, but I really think that we had to use that opportunity which we got with that experience with the COVID to build networks using that ICT technology, what we have now. It's much better than it was 20 years ago.
It's really, really interesting. And that challenge of building networks that any area can join, and I guess building a network, it's the kind of digital equivalent of improving the internal transport links within a mega region. Well, to take off, a network has to have direct practical benefit, offering something you can't get any other way. So can we set up networks that a wide range of people in any community would want to join for practical benefit? Well, of course, there's a lot of networks already in social media as well, but there are things that we could all benefit from directly. For instance, how to turn waste into a resource. So many people have a challenge, so many people want to do something, but yet the knowledge is the vital thing. We put waste into a bin, which is taken away. Some people dump it, but each item of waste is a resource if we could get the knowledge of how to do it. So possibly a simple network where anyone could ask about a particular type of waste and anyone could post up a solution that could be of much use and value. For example, it's possible to turn waste plastic into filament for a 3D printer, for which you'd normally pay around £30 for a kilogram. It uses equipment that can fit on a table, but it's difficult to find out much about it as only a few companies manufacture the equipment. And then there's electronic waste with all sorts of useful looking items, screws and wires and much else. But how do we take it to pieces? How do we find the use for it? Again, what's the most efficient way of reusing drink bottles? Is there a way in which smaller quantities of paper can be recycled within a community? Well, that's one idea, a waste into resources network, which might expand into a links between innovators network. But I guess, Stanko, there is a series of stages with any process like this, creating digital networks.
So first, what I wanted to say is, we didn't discuss that, but that we have new generation, young generation, which is much more prepared for use the technology than it was 20 years ago. I remember a couple of, maybe 5 years ago, I met a young boy who was 11, and I wanted to visit his parents, and he was going outside, on stairs. And I asked, what you do? I'm going to make a movie, to record something. And after 5 minutes he came, he had phone, he liked to sing, so he was singing, recording himself. He came back and says, now it has to be quiet, I have to make the sound. He found music on the somewhere on internet, on web, and then he edited his picture with his voice, and he has done. Nobody told him that young generation is communicating, asking how to do, and so on. So I think that's really a very good situation that we have much more young people who are ready to use very efficiently technology. And that's why we have to put together young and older one. Older people have more potential somehow. No potential. Young people have potential, but older people have experience, they have knowledge, they are socially mature, they have social network. And when you are retired, all that is gone. So somehow we have to do that. And another one is, if we wanted really to do something in the region which are out of 40 region, then we have to see what we really can do. We had to make so-called strength SWOT analysis to see where are we strong, where are we weak, where are opportunities, what we have to take care about it. And then I think we have to think about technology. I do not remember author, but there's a 5 regions of technology or something like that called book. It was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And they said, we have 5 technology for a moment. One is super technology. That's what Musk wanted to do, send people to Mars. It needs that ask for a lot of money, a lot of the effort. And then you have people who are somehow, they said, limit of growth. We have to take care about resources. Then you have people who say small is beautiful. So not large, do more on local level. And then in nature, all stuff is happening, so nature-based technology and then human-based technology. And I like that idea of human-based technology. So for example, if you look at match between Karpov and computer, brain, the power of brain is 20 watts. And the power of supercomputer is 4 megawatts or something like that, or even more, So humans are much more efficient if you look and then can build stuff, We have entropy because when there is decay, we have much more waste. But somehow people came with some idea. For that, they need not too much energy, and that idea can make very good stuff. Important things, but you need synergy. So in my opinion, if we wanted to make some kind of local network of regions which want to collaborate, the region have to see what really we can do. And I think there are a lot of possibilities, but we who are living out of region of 40, maybe we cannot do some very fundamental stuff. We can install laser or something like that, but we can make application in that field, application in the health, application, new stuff in the education. We need social innovation. For example, one of the main problem of our society is that our political system is still 18th century system. You have 2 parties and you have parliament. Somehow, if we can connect that people use ICT technology to participate in most important decision. Toffer said we have parliament which has 50% of vote and 50% are people who are answering on the phone, for example, for a moment. So there are a lot of possibility, and if you find it, then it's easy to make network. As I said, we have more and more young people who are doing that very efficiently. Elder people, not so much, but they can learn. And then we can really make networks which can develop the region without such big investment, joint ventures, and so on, what you have in Silicon Valley and all that mega region. So I'm really optimistic in the future, but we will see.
This is fascinating, Stanko. I think I'm hoping that there's going to be some questions for us, so we can hand back to Matthias and find out from him.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Howie and Stanko, for this wonderful and very positive analysis of how we can perhaps support. You spoke a lot about Velenje and Tuzla, but also, of course, Orkney and other sort of places that are somewhat outside of these mega regions, and they were sort of previously or still are to the degree falling behind economic development, and support them all into a more integrated and thus prosperous future. There has indeed, Howie, been a lot of questions from our audience, and some of them have actually occurred to me as well as I was listening to your very informative, very interesting talk. I'll start with a challenge, right? We see these these mega regions as these bastions of development, economically, technologically, but it is also the case that they are the largest emitters of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So they have a very significant environmental cost. So how do we deal with that imbalance? The fact that not only perhaps we can try and support more dispersed economic development to the modern digitalization tools that we have available, but how do we also make sure that we perhaps rein in some of the mega regions development that is unsustainable on a planet with limited resources and a very, very problematically changing climate. Any thoughts, basically?
Yes. I was going to say, just briefly, the point Stanko made, I had been picturing the industry, the old industries, coal and iron, very much as producing greenhouse gases, producing carbon dioxide. But that figure that Stanko mentioned about the computers and the amount of energy they use really made me think. I think, Stanko, you're better placed than me to answer this one.
Concerning pollution, I think the main problem is that we use more energy than in principle we have to. So I believe that some kind of energy saving is the most important part if you wanted to change situation with all that ecological problem. I live in the Slovenia, which has largest coal mine and coal mine power station. Slovenia in 1985, there was a really very big green movement here because we have a lot of problems with the air pollution, especially we have sulfur SOx, NOx, and it was interesting. That was the time of socialism, but we have very strong demonstration here, and then power plants started to change, and they made big changes, and now we have no problem more with any of that gases, but we still have problem with carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide maybe can be, there are technologies to capture carbon dioxide, but maybe they are for a moment too expensive. However, I really like more try to spend less, to spend less energy, not to buy stuff which you have for a couple of months, for example, and then you use new one. I think that the entropy, I had the idea here at Slovenia that we open some kind of entropy institute, which is concerned with all that problem, because all our processes are going, that entropy is increasing, and we have to somehow to resolve that. I understand that it's really very difficult because economy is things that you need to have more production, you need to have spending to move economy. But I think that we can find some stuff which are more environment friendly. For example, if you have nice concert, there is not a lot of environment damage, you have sound waves, so and I think that we have to do something in the food too, because nobody is talking about that, but food production is one of big, second one resource of greenhouse gases, So somehow I hope that people will come to the level to understand that we need to reduce our spending of energy, buying too much stuff, that we are not so much consumer-oriented society. It's not easy, but I believe that it will change. I'm optimistic in that sense.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm quite optimistic as well, but I think this kind of inspired another thought, at least with me, which I already had sort of before, which is, on one hand, yes, these regions again are hyper developed, the 40 regions, and then everything else seems to be lagging behind. But what is the correlation, if there is any, between these mega regions and human happiness? Are people actually happier living in these hyper technological places with additional industrial output? Or perhaps there are other types of value that sometimes you get from less consumerism, as you just said, Stanko, but also just, living in a perhaps more dispersed environment, more close with nature as well.
I believe that's connected with the choice of the energy first. If we want to live in the human, human-based or human-based technologies, then a lot of the stuff will be resolved. I remember when people at Celia were starting to do the Technopolis, then I had a big discussion with some people from Slovenia. They said, "Oh, Celia is developing." I said, "No, we don't need Technopolis. We need Humanopolis. We need human stuff. We have to make people happy. We have to make them connected." And I believe it's possible. I do not believe that people who are living in the Silicon Valley that are really very happy, and maybe there are people who are living in poor areas and they are much more happy. That's the problem of well-being, and I think that we have to use the technology which make us somehow happier, and then it's problem what we happiness is maybe not the best term. It's much better well-being. And you have from Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology. He made that PERMA model. He said that well-being is somehow connected with positive emotion, with engagement, with relationship, with meaning and accomplishment. And somehow we have to develop that much more than we do now. And I was in education for a long time, and I was teaching on university in different parts of the world, and I'm still somehow connected with education. And a couple of years ago, I started during the COVID crisis. You are looking much more to stuff, and I found book Case Against Education. And now we are doing some kind of survey here to see what people forgot, what have learned. And we do not learn anything about happiness or well-being in this school. For example, Denmark has from the kindergarten, they teach empathy, so that we understand that we can understand the problems of others. And Denmark is one of the happiest countries in the world. Scandinavia and Finland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and I believe that that the region can easier become happier than some Silicon Valley with all that problems they have, So, but we have to do in education to learn students stuff which they will not forget. They will use, during life. Empathy is important, communication is important, all that stuff. For example, Ken Robbins said, there is no school in which people are learning dance. And dance is really very good because you have physical activity, you have the psychology, there are a lot of stuff. So I think that we have to change education quite a lot if we wanted to resolve the problem, because our education is the education of second wave of classical industry. School is like a factory. It's starting on time, you have to do that, and they are standardized and so on. But that's another discussion. So I agree that maybe mega regions are not the best for live. It's maybe better to live in another place, but all can be improved with not too much investment, money investment, human, yes.
Yeah, I mean, this, as you said, Stanko, there's so many interesting things we could have touched upon, and we had quite a lot of questions coming in that, unfortunately, noting that's pretty much time to wrap up, we unfortunately won't get to answer. But I think, to close out, I think there's a couple of sort of thoughts about, is the technology really the answer, and how do we change the value system, which I think something that we really touched upon just now. So I guess maybe we just leave that open. But how do we change the value system so that contributions from outside, both outside of these regions as well as outside of this main technological paradigms, as you said, dance, creativity, music, things that actually are There's a great richness of them all around the world, wherever humans are, not just in these concentrated regions. And how do we make sure that that is at the forefront of how we shape the future? But with that, unfortunately, we do have to close. So I'll just say thank you both again, Howie and Stanko, for this absolutely fascinating conversation today. The first of the series, but already a highlight in its own right. Thank you also to our amazing technical team behind the scenes, Swain and John, who made this possible to live stream across the islands, across Scotland, across Europe, across the world, in a true, first of, attempt, one of the first attempts, I guess, in a big era of global connectivity where we are trying to all become more closely integrated. And finally, thank you to the audience, to everyone of you who've joined us this evening or who are watching this recording online. Our next event will be next Monday, 30th of May at 7:30 p.m. Here on Orkney International Science Festival YouTube channel. We'll be continuing with radical changes to islands and rural places. Slightly different though. This time we'll be looking at Scotland's pivotal role in an emerging mini space race. So do stay tuned for this next talk next week. And don't forget to follow our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we post a lot of interesting snippets and other information about both the Orkney International Science Festival, as well as interesting news from various scientific fields, including developmental studies that we've been looking at tonight. But for now, thank you very much, everybody, for your attention, and goodbye.
Goodbye.